You know, those of us who love flying machines and old warbirds in particular spend hours at museums and on airshow flight lines. But it's not often that you get to spend time with the aviators. These are true heroes that flew these aircraft. Heroes like this man, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Elsner. And we spent a memorable and humbling afternoon at the New England Air Museum in Connecticut in the fall of 2021 with Colonel Elsner, who generously shared a fascinating look into his flying career, which started in 1941.
When I really became interested in aviation was when I was in the Signal Corps. And there was information regarding joining the aviation cadets. I took the written exam and the physical, and I passed. And within a couple of months, I was at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, for pre-flight. Right. And this was just before Pearl Harbor. Oh. It was August 2nd, 1941. Wow. And from there we went to Cape Girardeau, Missouri, on the Mississippi, where we had PT-23s, with radio engines, 2 months. And I remember we had a couple of fatalities where instructors were showing off to cadets. One of them did a half roll, went right into the ground. That one sort of sobered us up. Some of the guys who were married right after that accident, they left. Yeah. It wasn't a good time to be married. From there it was to Walnut Ridge, Arkansas, where we had the BT-13, known as the Vultee vibrator, which was a much larger aircraft than the PT-23. Okay. And we did a lot of cross-country, and we learned night flying there. And I remember taking cross-countries, going over perhaps Memphis or somewhere. I remember one incident that really annoyed me. We had dark glass sunglass issues, and if you lost them, you had to pay for them. And I think I was doing a roll or something, and they came out and left. And not only did I have to pay, but they gave me 2 or 3 hours of walking punishment.
Because you lost your glasses?
That was the first time I ever came close to mutiny. got through with Walnut Ridge and went on to Dothan, Alabama with the AT-6. Right. Right. Yeah. Of course, it had folding gear. Yeah. And we had initial aerial marksmanship. We went to Eglin Field in Florida, which wasn't too far away. Right. And somebody was towing this rag, what was that, about 100 feet long or so? Yeah. Yeah. And we practiced gunnery. We had one 30 caliber machine gun on the cowl. And each bullet was a different color, like blue, green, yellow, red. And if you hit it, they could see the imprint. But some of the instructors didn't like to see that there weren't many hits, and they improvised themselves with colored pencils. Anyhow, that was the first taste of aerial gunnery. Sure. And that was for about 2 weeks, as I recall. And from there, I went to Pinellas Air Force Base near St. Pete, Florida, where we for 2 months we checked out in P-40s. I remember I had an instructor who had been an RAF pilot in Spitfires, a real nice guy. And I remember the first time trying to join up in formation. And he was here and I was way the hell back of him. But I think it was a lot of fun. But it was sort of nerve-wracking because you didn't want to get washed out, because a lot of people did. Right to the end, they were getting washed out for bouncing a landing or something. And I got tired of waiting to know where I was going. And somebody would come into the barracks and scream, "Volunteers!" And I went up, I said, where to? He says, "Alaska, at 2. I said, I'll volunteer. So I ended up in Anchorage. And I remember the squadron commander, the squadron commander, who was a West Pointer, he was carrying the club's liquor.
Yeah.
So when he came into land at Casco Cove, he pulled up and the container dropped into Massacre Bay with the club's liquor.
With combat experience and time in a P-47 aircraft, Elsner came off active duty in 1945, but that wasn't the end of his flying. Things were about to get interesting with an eventual career in the Air Guard, and Jimmy had what it took.
I remember on Thanksgiving of 1946, I rented an airplane from down at Brainerd Field, and I buzzed my home. My brother was in the plane with me, and I buzzed it, and somebody turned me in. So I had to go before Hank Weatherall, who was the commissioner of aeronautics for Connecticut.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what he said, but he admonished me for buzzing. And later on, I met this officers committee. They were selecting pilots, and Hank Weatherall was one of them. So I think it was Tom Carroll said, "How do we know that you like to fly?" And Weatherall said, "I can tell you he does." So I was accepted. I remember very early on when I don't know whether I covered this, when I was landing, we used to dive into the end of the runway and come around, and
Overhead pattern?
the linkage from the throttle to the carburetor, but broke. And when I was at this point, I pushed the throttle, nothing. Unfortunately, I landed without any damage. And then another time I was taking off at night, and I heard this, what I thought was an explosion up in the engine compartment. And when I got back, there was a cooked crow nestled in the radio.
Yeah.
So that was, I thought it was curtains when I heard that explosion, but it was the crow that hit
the airplane.
Our thanks to the New England Air Museum at the Bradley International Airport in Connecticut, which is home to hundreds of one-of-a-kind, meticulously restored aircraft, including the P-47 that Colonel Elsner laid his steady hands and sharp eyes on for the first time in many years during this interview. And of course, thanks to our friend Jimmy Elsner, a role model, a patriot, and one heck of an aviator who's forever earned our respect appreciation, and admiration.